So let's just jump right in. Starting at number 10, we have RPG-71. Now RPGs have become very popular, especially in pop culture, and we've even seen them in video games like Grand Theft Auto. Now these things are very destructive and there isn't really a lot that you can do to stop one. The RPG-71 is a handheld anti-tank weapon and it's used by the military groups all around the world. RPGs stand for Protivottankovi Granatomiot. Too long to say, I'll stick with RPG. Now these rockets are very destructive and they can be fired pretty much from anywhere. That's what makes them so deadly. At number 9, we have the P270 Musket. Now this is a Russian supersonic ramjet powered cruise missile and it's very fast. It has a maximum speed of Mach 3, so just try to stop one of these. It's an anti-missile system. Anti-missile systems have a hard time intercepting them because of the speed. Now on the downside though, or the plus side depending, they only have a range of about 155 miles. It was originally built in the 70s and they're now used in China and Egypt as well. The B-41 Mk-41 comes in at number 8. Now this is a gravity bomb that was the United States' most powerful nuclear warhead. However, it was retired back in the year 1957. It weighed over 10,600 pounds and it was just under 10 feet long. The level of devastation it could render was huge. It was retired because better technology came out that could be used from a much further away distance. But I included it on this list because to date nothing as powerful has ever been made by the United States. I'm glad we don't have to worry about this though, but yeah, we still got a whole lot to worry about because we got some other weapons coming up. Like the destructive Agni Missile. India's Agni Missile is a medium to intercontinental range ballistic missile which is very destructive. Now there's a whole family of Agni missiles from Agni 1 all the way to Agni 6, which is currently under development. Now the missiles have a range of more than 3,500 kilometers and Agni missiles are long-range nuclear weapons capable surface-to-surface ballistic missiles. Yeah, so when they travel far, they travel fast, and they hit hard. Number 6 brings us the Carl Garrett. The Carl Garrett is also known as the Morset Carl and it was the largest self-propelled weapon that was used during World War II. 7 of them were built for Germany and it wasn't a very easy weapon to use at all. Like you needed several modified tanks and a crane and a heavy transport trailer to use it. It had a 4,780 pound shell and it could be fired just over 6 miles away from the target. It was obviously a whole lot of work, a whole lot of effort to use one of these, but man, the damage that it can cause was massive. At number 5, we have Fat Man and Little Boy. Now these two bombs are probably the most famous in this episode. These are the nuclear bombs that were dropped on the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima during World War II by the United States, and they changed the world as we know it today. They showed the world what nuclear bombs could actually do, and sadly more than 2,000 people lost their lives, most of which were instantly lost. They're still the only 2 nuclear bombs that have ever been used in an attack. The B-53 comes in at number 4. Now the B-53 was one of the final very high yield thermonuclear bombs that the United States military used, and it was the most powerful warhead in history as it held 9 megatons of TNT. Now these things weighed more than 8,000 pounds and they were built between the year 1961 and 1965, and the final weapons were retired in the year 1976. Now the effects of the bomb would have been completely devastating to any area that it was dropped on. Now the blast area alone was said to be over 3 miles wide with immediate death and destruction, and this would all take place in a 9-mile radius, and of course the destruction would spread beyond that blast zone. Number 3 brings us the GBU-43B Massive Ordnance Aeroblast. So the official name, yeah, I'm not going to say that again, I already just said it, but it's simply known as the FOAB, meaning the mother of all bombs. Now this was a high yield bomb that was considered to be the most powerful weapon that the United States military ever created that wasn't a nuclear bomb. It could completely wipe out a 9-block area, and it was reported that the mother of all bombs was not a penetrator weapon and was mainly an airburst weapon for soft to medium surface targets covering wide areas and targets in contained environments like inside of a cave, for example. The weapon at number 2 is the Tsar Bomba. This thing Lord have mercy. Okay, so the Soviet RDS-202 hydrogen bomb, aka Tsar Bomba, was the most powerful nuclear weapon ever created. Now, it was tested on October 30th, 1961. It also remains the most powerful man-made explosive that was ever detonated, but it was never used in combat though. And you know, the mushroom cloud of the Tsar Bomba was seen from a distance of 161 kilometers away, or about 100 miles away. And the crown of the cloud was 65 kilometers or 40 miles or 213,000 feet high, makes the original nuclear bomb look like a baby. And finally, at number 1, we have the FOAB, the father of all bombs, and it's also known by the name of ATBIP, and this bomb was made by Russia. It's considered to be the most deadly weapon ever made, and it's an air-delivered but land-activated thermobaric bomb that is referred to as the father of all bombs. And if this bomb is ever deployed, it's reported that all that is alive merely evaporates. And I'm quoting that. So, you know, that's very scary. It was developed in the year 2007 and it weighs more than 15,500 pounds. Starting at number 10, we have dirty bombs. Now, this isn't in reference to the amount of dirt or anything that's on the bomb, but dirty bombs are simply bombs that are loaded with radioactive material. They are banned under international law because they have proven to be far too destructive for humanity. These bombs can turn any area into an uninhabitable wasteland, which of course would affect the sustainability of life on our planet. Next up at number 9, we have poison bullets. So we have become very accustomed to seeing all sorts of guns being capable of hitting far away targets with pinpoint accuracy. We see it in movies, we see it in TV, we see it in real life. However, early guns were not as accurate or even as powerful as the ones that we have today. So this led to people trying to get more creative to make their weapons more impactful. And this led people to put on their creative thinking caps and start putting poison on the bullets so that in case they miss their target, or if the bullets hit the target but the impact wasn't as powerful as they planned, at least the bullet would not be a total waste. So poison bullets have been banned since 1675 in the Strasbourg Agreement. Also, non-self-destructing landmines are completely banned. Landmines are only allowed if they include a self-destruction mechanism that will be activated after a certain period of time. This is a scary thought because, like, you know, you would have a lot of mines just sitting around there and they can be set off anytime by unsuspecting travelers. Back in the year 2013, 111 Cambodian citizens detonated landmines that had been in the ground for over 40 years. And because of their ongoing threat to the safety of people, since the year 1980, landmines must be equipped with a timer to deactivate them after a certain period of time. In at the number 7 spot, we have blinding laser beams. Blinding laser beams are powerful enough to cause permanent blindness. Of course, it's in the name. So that's the reason why they were banned. There are now alternatives that can be used to temporarily hinder your enemy's sight, like flash grenades and smoke grenades. Both of them are non-lethal and they prove to be effective in stopping the opposing forces in their tracks while you escape or plan your next offensive maneuver. Now let's take a look at napalm at number 6. Napalm is a burning agent and it can't be used on people nor anywhere near civilians. However, international law does not specifically prohibit the use of napalm against military targets, but only against civilian targets. This ban was put into effect by the United Nations Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons in 1980. Napalm is effective against secure locations like bunkers, caves, tunnels, as well as vehicles, convoys, etc. And napalm clings to whatever it touches, creating a large burning area around the target, and this decreases the need for accuracy when using napalm bombs. Halfway in at number 5, we have biological weapons. Probably the most disturbing, yet one of the oldest weapons ever used in combat. In ancient times, they would catapult rotting bodies into cities in order to spread diseases among their enemies. And today, any form of biological weapon is completely banned because the effects would be difficult to contain. Yeah, disease would spread like crazy. And not to mention, that would be just complete disrespect for those who passed away. Next up, we have plastic landmines. Now, we spoke about landmines before in this episode, and it's one thing to have a mine that can go off at any time, but imagine having a mine that cannot be detected or is very hard to detect. That's why militaries are no longer allowed to set up landmines that cannot be detected by X-ray. All of these landmines must have metallic pieces in them that can be seen by X-ray. In the number 3 spot, we have flamethrowers. These make for cool effects in video games and movies and all of that, but it's a whole different story in real life. Although flamethrowers aren't entirely banned, you can't use them to fry your enemies though. This is according to Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. You can't use fire weapons on people, but you can use them to clear away leaves and plants so that your troops can continue onward. Just imagine if real life was like the video games when it came to fire weapons. Scary thought. Spike pits are number 2. When I was a kid, I had this fear of falling into one of these things. Like, I don't even know where that fear came from, but spike pits or punji stick traps were weapons that were used as late as the Vietnam War. However, Protocol 2 of the 1979 Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons finally banned their use. They were made out of wood or bamboo that was sharpened and heated and often covered by leaves or grass or whatever to make it look like the ground was completely open to walk on. And then when the enemy would walk over it, boom, it would collapse and they would, you know, well, I don't have to describe what would happen next. It's a spike pit. And finally, the number 1 military banned weapon is poisonous gases. And there are 5 types I'm going to be listing in number 1. First off, we have the blood agents, and these are toxic and are absorbed into the blood, and they cause long and violent ending to life. Now, phosgene gas as well as hydrogen cyanide are 2 kinds of blood agents. Then there's blister agents like mustard gas, and they cause severe chemical burns on the skin and eyes. There's nerve agents like VX and sarin gases, and they break down the neurotransmitters that make organs function. And following that, we have the choking agents, and these impede the victim's ability to breathe, causing a buildup of fluid in the lungs and eventually leads to drowning. And the final type is nettle agents. Now, nettle agents irritate the skin, but they do not cause any blisters.
Because this particular class is known as the Akula class to the Russians, and the NATO designation is what they call the Typhoon class. For those who don't know, the reason why I have to clear this up is because there is also a NATO-designated Russian submarine that is also known as the Akula, in which the Russians have designated Project 971 or the Shuka B submarine, but the Typhoon is designated Project 941. So this is Project 941 that we're talking about. Phew, got that out of the way. Hope you guys aren't that confused. We're talking about one big sub, not the little tiny one. And to get started into this whole video, why do they call it the Akula class? Well, because that is Russian for shark. And definitely when it comes to the submarine, it was definitely a predator and was better than anything America had at the time. Maybe the Americans had things that were more accurate or more silent subs, but this one had the most amount of nukes. As a matter of fact, the Akula class submarine was so advanced that at the time of its release, the Americans were like, what? The Russians could actually make something like this? When this submarine came around, most of the Americans were like, wow, they were 10 years ahead of where we thought they actually were. And to give you an idea of how this ship all works and why it's so deadly, let's take a little look at its history. So this nuclear-powered ballistic missile began construction in 1976. At the time, Russia had a very good knowledge that the Americans had, or at least were building, the Ohio-class submarine. And the Ohio-class was large. As a matter of fact, it's the competitor to the Akula-class sub. And as a matter of fact, both of these submarines are still, in fact, the largest submarine classes that have ever been built. And to give you an idea of the differences between the two in terms of size, the Ohio class came in at 560 feet long, whereas the Typhoon, or the Akula, was 574 feet long. But of course, it wasn't just the size of the submarine, it was also what it was capable of, and that was firepower. On the American side, you had the Ohio-class submarine that was capable of firing 192 nuclear warheads in one salvo. These also had a firepower of approximately 100 kilotons. Some of you may be out there going, what the heck is a kiloton? How do I measure that? Well, to give you an idea, the Hiroshima bomb, that was 15 kilotons. So these are a lot bigger. They could destroy a city completely. However, of course, the Russians wanted to do bigger and better and longer, and therefore they created the R-39 SLBM, which stands for Submarine Launched Ballistic Missile. Now, before I get into the specifics of this missile, which was made for the Typhoon class submarine, I should probably mention that this submarine came into service in 1981, and as I stated prior, it's still in use today. They just stopped making them in 1989. In total, they had about 7 of these ships planned, with only 6 of them being made. 2 of them are now currently laid up, 1 is still floating, and 3 of them have been retired. As well, interesting enough, when they built these crafts, they were either sponsored by a city or a company to make them. But let's jump back to the R-39 missile, because this was a very important missile that made the Typhoon extraordinarily dangerous. The R-39 missile was introduced in 1983, and it stayed in service until approximately 2004. Now, these missiles had an effective range of 8,300 kilometers. In case you're wondering, if you were to go into the middle of America and the middle of Russia, that's 8,800 kilometers long. So therefore, these ships were capable of firing to American shores while being deep within Russian waters. Now, to give these missiles the extra range, they actually had to be modified, and they were considered one of the heaviest SLBMs in the world, coming in with a total weight of 84 tons. And why were these missiles and the Typhoon class so extraordinarily dangerous? The reason for this is because within one of these missiles, they were armed with 10 nuclear warheads, with each one being approximately 100 to 200 kilotons. And that was just within one warhead, because within the Typhoon or Aquila class submarine, they had 20 of these missiles ready to go and fire, which made this Russian sub being capable of firing 200 nuclear warheads in one salvo. And to really give you an idea of how dangerous all these were, if you were to take all the 6 submarines and have them fire all at once, that would be a total of 1,200 warheads, capable of doing 6.6 times greater than that of Hiroshima in terms of damage. Okay, so now that I've scared the living bejesus out of you guys, and you're now realizing the actual height of the Cold War and going, oh, no wonder why we were almost on the brink of absolute destruction, keep in mind these R-39 missiles are no longer in use as of 2004. That being said, though, they have been replaced with the RSM-56 Beluga, which within it has 6 warheads with a yield of at least 150 kilotons, and as well, inside them they can also carry 10 to 40 decoy warheads inside them. And as for the operational range of these, it's anywhere between 8,000 to 8,300 kilometers. But it's also been said that they can go beyond 9,300 kilometers with an accuracy of 350 meters. And crazy enough, this missile is not even on the radar of the START Treaty, which was the treaty of a nuclear arms reduction, which basically made the R-39 not allowed in the first place. Now, of course, I talked a lot about the missiles that are on board the Typhoon or Aquila class sub, but let's talk about some specifics of the submarine itself, and of course, the one that's still floating around today. This is the Dmitry Donskoy, which is not only the oldest one still surviving, but was the first one to ever be laid down on June 30th, 1976, and was launched in September of 1980, and went into full service on February 9th of 1982. In today's world, these ships, although there is only one left, they have been denied an upgraded refit service, as they plan to be released by the Bory-class submarine, in which Russia currently has 3 of them active. These old Aquila-class submarines were capable of going 2.22 knots on the surface and about 27 knots submerged. Crazy thing is, these were also reinforced so well that they could be underwater for 120 days, and that's actually just in normal conditions. If you really bunkered down and conserved power and did many different things, they could stay underwater for a lot longer. On top of that, it also had a total test depth of 1,300 feet, as well, it has 6 firing tubes firing the famous Type 53 torpedo. The Type 53 torpedo is also considered one of the most common torpedo on submarines and in the Navy. And one thing that's really dangerous about these, at least according to the Americans, many say that these are extraordinarily dangerous because they don't act or respond well to countermeasures. And one thing that I just forgot to mention also when it comes to this submarine, it has approximately 160 men that crew it. An interesting side note, when it comes to the other 5 submarines that were decommissioned, they had a really interesting plan to use the Aquila class submarine. One of the major plans was to have these submarines converted into oil transports so that they could transport oil underneath the polar ice. However, this idea was scrapped because they realized it would be really expensive to figure out a way to transfer the oil from the platform to the submarine and then from the submarine to the oil tanker itself. Either way, this has us been learning about the Aquila or Typhoon class submarine, the biggest submarine of any class in the world. And it may be named after a shark for its deadly teeth, but because of its size, it should have been named after the whale. And with the growth of our technology being able to make things smaller and more effective, we will most likely never see a submarine this big ever in human history. So first of all, what is a railgun? What makes it different from the rifles that all the other soldiers use today? Well, a railgun, basically how it is different from a cannon or conventional weaponry, is that conventional weaponry is where you have a bullet that is being charged by gunpowder or something similar. Once this bullet is charged, it travels down a barrel to fly through the air and hit its intended target. But railguns, they don't really work the same way. The way they work is through magnets. And how it works is, in a layman's terms, they take that magnetic projectile and it goes through the barrel, slinging it towards its target. Now within the barrel, they have these little tiny rails that emit a very high amp current. The projectile, which is magnetic, travels from rail to rail to rail within the barrel, building up momentum until it leaves. And that is why it's called a railgun. Now, are they in use today? That is a very good question. And the best answer that I can give you is yay and nay. Kinda. Because although there's been a lot of testing going on, in 2018 it was heavily rumored that China's ship, the Haiyang Shun, had an experimental EM rail attached onto it, making it the first ship to have installed some form of working railgun. The US, which is one of the countries that is one of the leads in technology, has plans to put this on naval ships and test it, but there's nothing conclusive as of the time of recording this episode. And if these facts are true, China has beat America in the EM railgun race. And for those who might doubt it, well, I can see your point, but this technology has been tested quite a bit before. And as well, the gun emplacement on this landing craft is unlike any other gun that we've seen in history. But it's not just the look of the weapon that gives us the idea that maybe China has done it. It's also these giant battery packs that are located on the ship. Now, what we do know about EM railgun technology is that it requires a lot of power to use it. And if you're using it on a ship, you need a lot of battery power and storage. And that would basically be big battery packs similar to ones that might be here. Now, America has also done a test of what is known as the General Atomics Blitzer railgun, which worked extremely well against ballistic missiles. This particular railgun has been stated that it can integrate with any form of satellite-to-ground radar and also has 2 times the range of most rocket-launching artillery systems. But one of the most impressive tests for a railgun was done by the US Department of Sweden's BAE company. Which I'm actually not really surprised that Sweden is somewhat behind this because, well, as I talked about it in episode 1, I talked about Sweden's adaptive technology that can make tanks virtually impossible to see through infrared scopes. But however, jumping back to the railgun issue, this company had a successful test of its railgun for the Navy. During this test, it showed that it had 10 times the range of conventional Navy cannons, coming in at a range of 220 miles. Now, this railgun was known as the 32 MJ or megajoule prototype, or the electromagnetic laboratory railgun. And this test was conducted in 2007. Of course, there have been other tests that have happened throughout the years and done at different megajoule levels. But the problem that we look at today is not just power when it comes to EM railguns. It's also the durability of their barrels. For example, most railguns cannot continuously fire, and earlier days there was a problem that the barrels had a very short lifespan. Although some officials have stated that this problem has been fixed, with some railguns improving their barrel lifespan from 10 shots per barrel to now doing over 400 shots. However, those statements should be taken with a grain of salt, because the one thing that wasn't stated is how big the shot was and how powerful the megajoule was. The more powerful, the less of a lifespan the barrel has. And on top of that, to keep up with current technology, an EM railgun should be able to shoot 6 rounds a minute and be able to fire 3,000 rounds in a lifespan. And currently at this time, EM railguns are not capable of doing this. Another big challenge for railguns at this time is guidance. This, of course, is getting better as research continues. Most railguns do not meet the requirements to develop a package to do things like hit incoming missiles. That being said, the General Atomics railguns seem to improve this problem. However, it is still off from where governments would like EM railguns to be. Either way, this is technology that is new to us, and just like the bullet and the cannon, it took years to perfect. Keep in mind, at one point, bullets and cannons were even round in their ammunition, and even V2 rockets at one point didn't have the range. And now missiles can be fired or launched from any place in the world and strike anywhere in the world. And in its current state, these EM railguns are on the brink of forever changing the world in how we fight. And therefore, they are being inducted as an amazing world wonder.